You're watching Force 13's live streaming service.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to a Caribbean Weather Desk show. This is a bit of a tropical update show as well. We're discussing about what's out there in the Atlantic and what's going to be happening in the days to come, and my thoughts on the situation and if anything, if any of you out there have any questions, throw them on after. I'd love to hear them. Right, so first things first, here is the wide view tropical Atlantic satellite imagery, where, well, for the most part, it's relatively quiet for the West Atlantic, but as we could see in the East Atlantic, there's a bit of activity that has popped up in recent days. We have Tropical Storm Fiona right here in the northern central tropical Atlantic. This system should pretty much has lived most of its life out already. It's on the downward trend and should be moving in a general direction towards Bermuda and probably most likely weakened to a remnant low and dissipated before it reaches there. There's a bit of wind shear that's blowing off the convection off of the system, and as you can see on the satellite imagery, these low-level clouds, the low-level spin, the structure of the system being moving off to the west-northwest, while the convective mass gets thrown off to the east and northeast. And the reason for this is that we got a big upper-level trough, an upper-level low across here, causing a bit of wind shear to come across through here. So, yeah, we're not really expecting much, and I won't be talking much about Fiona. However, I will be talking about this here. Now, what is this, you may ask? This here is Invest 99L. As in case some of you don't know, when tropical disturbances get tagged to be investigated by the various agencies, they tag it from 90 to 99, and the prospective basins get a lettering after the number, such as Atlantic gets an L, the Eastern Pacific gets an E, Central Pacific C, West Pacific W, and so on and so forth. So this here is 99L, and it is moving towards the west. It is fairly large in size. The overall, as an overall broad cyclonic envelope here. I wouldn't really say much about it having a definitive center just yet, because I mean, after all, it's just a big broad spin with no definitive center. Also, the convective mass on it is not too great either. Little minor bits on the north and northwest side, while the heaviest of mass is building and kind of meandering around the south side. I do think that this is fairly decent setup for later down the road as it pushes westward. Now, the forecast for the system has been kind of flip-flopping every little which way, and well, it makes sense. It's a broad system. There's no definitive center circulation to pinpoint on, so models don't really have a clear definitive center to latch onto. Yes, the ATCF has labeled a quotations a center, but it's not actually the center, but rather just the middle of the whole entire envelope itself. And of course, the models generally are in two camps. You have the southern camp, which takes it through the Eastern Caribbean, through the islands here, and then south of Hispaniola, and then maybe in a longer range, maybe in the Western Caribbean, Cuba, and out into the Gulf of Mexico here. Then you have the northern camp, which the models would take it north, crossing the northeastern Caribbean, either passing between the U.S. Virgin Islands and Puerto Rico, or passing between Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, and basically skirting along the northern coast of Hispaniola, going through Bahamas, then through the Florida Straits, and then into, well, either Florida, Mississippi, or Alabama. Either scenario, in terms of my thinking, is that either way, if it goes to the Caribbean or through the Bahamas, it'll still end up within this area here. I would like to hope that it's nothing serious, but if it does get up into here and it's quite something, I'd have to say I'm sorry, Florida, but I'd rather you guys getting most of it than with Mississippi and Louisiana, especially after all that flooding that had occurred in these areas, and with Louisiana and Mississippi getting the worst of it. And they really would not need a tropical system moving through there, whether tropical storm, hurricane. So yeah. So let's just take a look at the satellite for 99 a little closer up, and you can see the convective mass a little bit better here. You can also see the low-level turning in the clouds. You'd also be able to see it a little bit better on the RGB satellite imagery. You can see that overall, before night cuts over the system, that it has a fairly decent spin. I mean, there might be a center kind of starting to consolidate here. Likely what will happen for the next day or two, you'll have multiple centers trying to develop over this broad area, and it's going to be a struggle to see which one of those ends up winning out. That'll be something we'll have to watch. But overall, it has a decent circulation, although broad, and no definitive center yet per se. So the models will flip and flop. We'll have to watch and see how that works out in the long run. But either way, we're expecting the system to indeed hit the Eastern Caribbean by I'd say by about the maybe middle to middle late part of the week, maybe. So all you folks in the Eastern Caribbean, keep an eye on this system. The system's likely to probably would develop before it gets to you guys, so you guys better start prepping up for it. Either way, you guys are going to get gusty winds, rain, stormy seas. So yeah, keep an eye on that. I know that a few of you guys here don't really think you need it, especially after Earl passing through earlier this month. But yeah, just prep yourselves up. So let's take a look at the most recent model runs, and as say, remember that the models are flipping and flopping around the place. Um, but this is the current model run as of 18 Zulu, and it's pretty consistent. Moves westward into the Caribbean, and then from when it moves into the Caribbean, this is where it diverges in terms of track. Um, Overall, it's been flipping north and south with every run. With this run, it's north, and you have the northern camp moving further out into the Atlantic, and you have the southern camp, which goes over Hispaniola, Cuba, out into the Bahamas. So it's just, I wouldn't put too much faith in it just yet in terms of any particular track. We do know that it will be impacting the Eastern Caribbean. We do know that Puerto Rico and Hispaniola will end up getting some sort of impacts, whether direct or indirect. So, keep an eye on it. In terms of impacts to the United States, now I'd say it's too early to discuss exactly where it would go, and there are some models that suggest that you could have it ramping up to a major hurricane off the East Coast. Now I do want to warn you guys that looking at long range models like that, uh, you'd look at it and say, okay, well, that's something that could happen. I would say trust it with a grain of salt. Um, for now, the main thing is seeing what the system does as it gets across here and how it will impact the Eastern Caribbean. I'd say by the time the system is about south of Puerto Rico, that's when we would start looking at possible impacts to the United States, but definitely not this far out, for sure. So let me just run through this here. This is the upper level winds across the area, and this is a shear map from the University of Wisconsin, and they updated the graphic recently to show coloration with the favorable, neutral, and unfavorable shear environment. And this here is Fiona, and as you can see, Fiona's definitely getting smacked with some unfavorable shear. Yeah, it's fairly low on the unfavorable side, only 25, 30, 30 knots. As it does move across towards Bermuda, they're thinking that shear will probably ease up a little bit, but the thing is that dry air will be getting into it, the dust will be getting into it, and I don't really think that anything much is going to be left of Fiona by the time it gets to around here. So I think shear is not going to really help out with Fiona. But in terms of 99, you can see right here, this is a very large upper level anticyclone. Giving relatively low wind shear for the system. Yeah, on the outer edge there's a bit of higher shear, but the main focus is the actual cyclonic envelope itself, and it has quite a bit of low shear. And as it moves westwards, this upper level anticyclone will follow, and this little sliver of unfavorable shear would likely move out, and it's pretty much smooth sailing with wind shear across the area throughout pretty much most of the Caribbean. So we could see this thing ramp up to something quite decent. I definitely think that this would become the next hurricane for the season. Whether or not it becomes major or not is still a little bit unsure. There are a few models that are indicating that this could be our first major, but we'll wait and see what happens. So what about the low-level structure, as I've mentioned before? Well, this is the 850 millibar vorticity map, and this basically shows the spin in the low levels of the atmosphere. And for tropical systems, you would want to see pretty rounded off, decent area of vorticity, like how you see here with Fiona. Fiona's got pretty much what you would call a classic vorticity signature for a tropical system. You could also see similar over here in the East Pac with that East Pac system, K, yes, Tropical Storm K, and you know, for 99L, you know, it's getting there. It's not totally perfect, but it is getting there, and the vorticity is increasing. The vorticidal values here on the side of the chart. And of course, as you get higher and higher, the more spin in the atmosphere you get. And so compared to what it was yesterday, it was elongated. It wasn't very. It looked a lot like this up here, which is not what you would want for developing system. But so far, it is doing pretty good. So we'll watch it as it moves through. In terms of convergence, convergence meaning where two different winds from opposite directions come and meet, and what they do is that they converge, and when they converge, they tend to want to lift the air mass up, and thus helping building with thunderstorms. And as you can see with 99, the convergence is good. It's definitely there. It's growing. It's developing. Upper level divergence, and it's the opposite of convergence. It's as and this is in the upper level, and this is the air expanding outwards. And here you can see it's definitely got it. I mean, it's got it more centered to the south, but eventually it'd be more centered over the system once the thunderstorms and stuff starts building. But you know, it's doing pretty good. So just to show you what the Saharan air layer, Saharan dust, dry air looks like for these systems. And as you can see, when Fiona went through it, pretty much cleared out the Saharan dust. There's a few small little specks, but you know, these areas are considered not harmful to developing systems. Basically, anything from about right here on the bar and going eastwards. You know, this is where you have less dry and stable air mass, and as you go to the red and pinks, much more denser, drier air mass, and then the dust. And you know, Fiona cleared it out, and this has very little to deal with. And as you can also see, there is another system coming off of Africa. This is a tropical wave with a area of low pressure, which is coming off of Africa. The National Hurricane Center mentioned the system, has not fully tagged this system as an invest just yet. But this system, as well as this system, National Hurricane Center is expecting both to become at least a tropical depression by the middle of the upcoming week. So we'll see how this goes. We'd probably talk about this one later down the line once it gets offshore, and we see how it does once it gets over to open water. Main concern right now will be this, as it will be affecting the Caribbean. So In terms of the steering pattern, the steering flow, why am I thinking that the system will move? Why I'm buying the southern camp of the system moving through the Caribbean rather than heading up north? Well, let's discuss this a little bit, right? Well, what's happening is that you have, let's get that there, and then bring up this, right? We have the Azores Bermuda Atlantic ridge of high pressure all across here, and you also have a couple of troughs coming in out of Canada and northern United States. Now, what they are forecasting, and these are kind of the reasons why some of the models are kind of going a little gung-ho about bringing the storm up to the East Coast and so on. But I'll explain why I don't really buy that so much. So this here is the cold front or trough that in particular which models are picking up on, and by Sunday going into Monday, Tuesday time, this should be pretty much off the coast here, and it would have broken down the western part of the Atlantic high somewhat. That's the reason why Fiona is moving up towards Bermuda rather than moving westwards. Now, the models seem to amplify this trough as it gets offshore. Now, some of them amplify the trough to, I mean, you wouldn't see an amplified trough like that until maybe mid to late fall going into winter. And you know, for it being this time of year, I don't really buy it so much. And then the model's kind of tiptoeing whether it'll be further east or further west, further north, and then the low that's carrying it be going further up into Greenland or back into Canada. And all of it kind of plays into, you know, how strong the trough will be, where exactly its placement will be, and how the Atlantic high, which this part of it will be rebuilding, thus pushing 99L here towards the west. And the thing is we got to figure out, well, okay, how far is the high going to push west, and how far is the trough going to come down? Now, I believe that the trough will come down to about here, Northern Carolina, South Carolina, and then it would pretty much become stationary right about here, the 35-degree line, and the rest of that trough will end up dissipating and going bye-bye. The rest of it will end up getting shot out northeastwards, and I do think that the highs will build back in. But also, you notice that there's a big high-pressure ridge out here across the U.S. behind this trough. And I do think that as that piece breaks off and the rest of that moves out, this high moves over across the East Coast and out into the West Atlantic, thus causing the bridge of ridging to build back. That's why I believe that instead of pulling north, like some of the models suggest, that it would actually move westwards. Now, just saying, I've spoken to a couple of guys, a couple of meteorologists at the National Weather Service and Weather Channel, and AccuWeather, and a few other people, and we do think that it is definitely possible. This theory about the trough lifting out quicker, the high building in, and the ridge building back in, thus pushing the system more south and into the Caribbean. We do expect that after the high moves off, another trough will be set up just about the same place where this one is, and it'll push east, and the track, once it gets to about right here, would probably pull northwards into Florida, Mississippi, Alabama. Could even go to Louisiana, God forbid. They've already had enough flooding and bad weather to last them a long time, so definitely don't need that. So, I mean, just saying, if this trough does amplify itself and intensify itself and end up actually sticking its guns all the way down into Florida, which, by the way, I highly doubt it, but if let's just say it does, then you would expect Fiona will obviously will get trapped either way the trough gets amplified or not in that trough and end up dissipating. There are some models that are showing what looks to be Fiona redeveloping, but it's not. It's really Fiona getting entangled into the trough, and the trough ending up building another frontal low similar to this. But anyway, that here or there, when this system gets to about here, if the trough is amplified enough, then it is possible that it could indeed pull northeastwards across the east coast. But at the moment, I'm not seeing that. And just saying, if it does, there's very, very high sea surface temperatures across the West Atlantic, and it could definitely support a decent system coming up the eastern seaboard. Now it's just a matter of where these highs and where these troughs are being placed. It's kind of the reason why it's flip-flopping. We don't know. It's kind of maybe 50-50 either way it goes. So we'll have to watch it. East Coast, Gulf Coast, Western Caribbean, Central Caribbean. All of you guys have to watch this closely, especially as soon as it enters the Eastern Caribbean. That would be crunch time to figuring out whether Western Caribbean, Gulf of Mexico, or Bahamas and East Coast. So we'll have to wait and see. So this is another view of it. This is the staring flow pattern, also by the University of Wisconsin. And Fiona here, and obviously you see the break in the high pressure here, and that's where it will be going. This is the troughing that's expected to move over to the East Coast. The high here, the other high here, 99L here. Now, as I said, I expect this to break off about there and that to move out, the high to build back in, the high behind here to build back in, and closing the gap once again. So if we were to look back at storms that I think we could be following, similar to, probably not in intensity, but quite similar in track. Just a few ones I could quickly pick off, just to start off with. I couldn't pull up any of the East Coast ones just at the moment, but this is for the southern track systems and the southern camp. And this is Tropical Storm Faye back in 2008. Waldo was a little bit different because the tropical wave, its low-level energy that ended up forming the low was a lot further north, and it was a similar kind of situation. You had the Atlantic high out here, you had a trough come down, and the trough kind of split and went, and the high pressure kind of built back in, even though it was a little later down in the run, down the timeline when it did. Kind of, shows the kind of setup that I see somewhat similar. the next system that I would think for Southern Camp would be another one of 2008 systems, and it is Gustav. Now, the models have been dibbling-dabbling, but one thing that I have noticed is that a few of them did show 99L coming into the Caribbean at a very low latitude, coming in through around here rather than up here. And if that's the case, Gustav track, well, at least similar to Gustav track, is certainly possible. If the high out here builds in and doesn't move out that quickly, then it is possible that we could be looking at a track into Louisiana, Mississippi area. But obviously, as I said, way too early in time to know that for sure. But I just pulled this one up because I found it interesting that it also had its low levels down here as well before moving up. Another one that was also low level tracking system was this one, Hurricane Ivan from 2004. Now, Ivan, well, basically its track pretty much is very similar to Infest 99. The only difference is that 99 is just a wee bit further north, but generally with some of the forecasts and what I see, still generally getting into the same area down here, generally moving west-northwest to northwestwards. I mean, it could very well move more like this rather than like this, but hey, this is one of the analogs there that I could pick out. And the other one would be Charlie of 2004 as well. Another one that came in pretty low, and this one was taken up by the trough and pulled out. It did happen to get into the Gulf of Mexico, impacting Florida and then up the East Coast. I do think that this could be one of the possibilities. If you would want to say, give it a third camp, you got the north camp that goes through here and up like that. You got the south camp that goes through here and up like that, and then you got the middle camp, which goes generally like this, maybe over Jamaica or maybe north of Jamaica through the Cayman Basin, anywhere from the central Cuba to western Cuba, Florida, and then up the east coast like this. It is certainly possible. As I'm saying, it's early in the game. There's a lot of things that could happen, a lot of changes that could go on, and it's just a wait and see game. But wait and see game for the Central Caribbean westwards to the Western Caribbean, Gulf states, East Coast. It's a waiting game. For you folks in the Eastern Caribbean, prep up for this now, because this thing is expected to start heading towards you guys by the early to middle part of the week. I would say more like a Wednesday or so. So, you guys better prep up for this, just in case if this thing does indeed intensify itself up to hurricane, because there are some models that were indicating hurricane, some of them major hurricane. I'm not too 100% sure about that just yet, but hurricane coming through here. So, you guys prep yourselves, be ready for it. It's coming for you. Just good luck and keep cool heads and stay tuned for more updates that do come out. Anyway, this is relatively short, mind you, I say relatively, update on this particular system, 99L, which I definitely think is the highest threat to land at the moment, and also probably a good chance that this could become our next system. there's kind of a debate whether the system behind and this, which one will develop first. It's a race between the two. National Hurricane Center agrees that it would definitely have become, at the very least, a tropical depression by Wednesday, Tuesday night, Wednesday. So for both systems. So it's just a matter of that. If that indeed happens, then which one will be the first one to get the name? Gaston, Hermine, Gaston. We'll have to wait and see. But anyway, this is it from me now. I will have another update, possibly a little bit later, a little bit longer, with more details and more stuff. And if not, there will be some more coming up, likely probably tomorrow or Monday, and definitely as we go through the upcoming week, these updates and these shows will definitely happen a lot more. And if supposed Gaston or Hermine ends up doing something pretty decent, we may end up. I may end up doing, constant shows every maybe 2 or 3 times a day during the week, the upcoming week. So anyway, that'll be it for me and for the Caribbean Weather Desk for now. All you stay safe and good luck, and keep an eye on what's going on out there. All right, thanks.